Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. I will cover the debate in a separate broadcast with my political opposite, Kevin McDonald, in a new show called Unscripted Politics that will premiere on the Brushwood Apple Network Saturday, September 14th. Just wanted to mention it was no big deal with the debate. Both candidates lie. Harris did not pull a Joe Biden, so her supporters and the slopstream media were ecstatic. It's hard for her to do much past her given statements where she said so many far left wacko things. And of course, she's got the terrible record of the Biden-Harris administration. On the other hand, Trump exaggerated facts and made silly statements like illegals eating people's cats in Illinois. Come on, folks, we can do better than this. Anniversary of 9/11. We Americans are at the highest level of risk since that sad day. In a sad commentary on the state of our uncontrolled borders and failures and lack of morale in our security agencies, experts tell us that we are in more danger now than on that tragic day on September 11th, 2001. I was in Washington, D.C. on 9/11. I was on the west side of the Washington Beltway. I spent 4 hours trying to drive home, about a 20 to 25-minute drive normally. All the while, I was watching a 5-mile-high black plume of smoke rising from the Pentagon. It was a tough day, folks. Mobile phone service was out. I had friends frantically trying to call me since I had taught classes in the Pentagon in the previous year. I was not in the Pentagon, fortunately, on the day the plane hit, but my friends didn't know what my schedule was, so they didn't know that I was not in the Pentagon. Arriving home the rest of the day, every few minutes, news coverage showed over and over again the video of planes hitting the Twin Towers in New York City. The commentators detailed the horrors of people jumping from the high floors of skyscrapers to their death below. Everything was shut down for days. Washington Reagan International Airport was closed for months. And yet we have the Biden-Harris administration that is so concerned about winning votes that they will not refer to them as Islamic terrorists. Their own people say we are less secure. What have they done about it? We've got a financial mess ahead. Home buyers' required down payment hits a record high under the Biden administration of $67,000, according to a recent report from NAR, National Association of Realtors. This translates into a monthly payment required to afford a median price existing single-family home of $2,303. Incredibly, this is 91% more than the $1,206 monthly payment needed in 2021, just 3 years ago. Therefore, a person needs an income of $110,544 to qualify for a mortgage on a median price single-family home, up from $57,888 needed at the end of the Trump administration. And it's worse on the commercial side. This report is actually from the leftist operation Politico, among other sources. Due to working from home, perhaps an overbuilt situation, office space values are crashing in a number of major markets. Commercial loans tend to be on shorter terms, like 5 to 7 years versus 20 to 30 years for a home mortgage. If these loans come due when the values of these buildings are way down due to vacancies and projected demand, this could be a major problem. One report is that in the last 4 months, 7 office properties were sold at a staggering loss of $100 million each. One Midtown Manhattan office building just sold at a 97.5% discount, I guess discount off the projected market value. This could impact $1 trillion in office properties as they come up for loan renewal. One option is to convert some to residential use, but of course not all buildings can be converted, and even this takes time and lots of money. Mortgage rates tend to float with the federal funds rate. The Federal Reserve began hiking rates about 2 years ago to deal with the record inflation under Biden-Harris. Note that we now have sticky inflation, and I question whether, other than the concern for the upcoming election, that there would be any decrease in the rate at all. Special report in the Daily Signal, among other sources, details the growing tragedy of missing migrant children. I have read estimates of up to 320,000 missing. Speaking as a parent and a grandparent, even one missing child is awful. However, these numbers are stunning. They have become dramatically worse due to the open borders of the Biden-Harris administration. A major concern is the physical and sexual abuse or forced labor of these children who are being illegally trafficked into the U.S. One report mentioned a party in one state has had over 300 children released to just that one party with zero accountability. Over 32,000 minors have failed to appear in court, and, quote, as of May 2024, ICE has not served NTAs, notices to appear, on more than 291,000 unaccompanied children. What is our government up to? What is the Department of Homeland Security up to? Where are these children? Senator Mike Lee, Republican from Utah, told the Daily Signal, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris' utter incompetence to secure a southern border is indistinguishable from federally subsidized human trafficking. Countless children are being harmed by the broken system perpetuated and celebrated by the Democratic Party. They simply do not care because their mission is to erode the sovereignty and voting power of the American citizens, no matter who gets hurt. The bottom line is that the systems in place in the U.S. simply cannot handle the volume of minors coming in. This has allowed the exploitation that has been documented in far too many reports. Harris would up the corporate tax rate to 28%, her campaign says. Some may say this is actually a good headline, that corporations should pay more. The problem is, of course, that the U.S. competes in a world economy. When Trump took office in 2017, the U.S. tax rate was 35%. Trump cut it to 21%, since corporations were both moving their headquarters overseas and holding cash overseas. Following this cut by the Trump administration, $100 billion was brought back into the U.S. and subjected to tax. I note that this has apparently skipped Harris's mind during the debate. Note that most Americans are actually stockholders directly and through retirement savings accounts. Dividends are sent out after corporate taxes are paid. Many retirees are waiting on those dividends to supplement their measly Social Security checks. So increasing corporate taxes is unlikely to help people that Harris ignorantly claims that those are the ones she wants to help. Put me down as opposed to raising the corporate rate. The Biden administration's latest illegal immigration scam. This report's based on work by Simon Hankinson, a senior research fellow in the Border Security and Immigration Center at the Heritage Foundation. He alerted the public to the Biden-Harris parole in place for alien spouses. The current administration is doing all it can to keep illegals here, despite clear immigration laws that require normal application procedures. Parole of illegal aliens into the U.S. under the Immigration and Nationality Act states that parole should be temporary for urgent humanitarian reasons or for significant public benefit of Americans and decided on a case-by-case basis. But the Biden-Harris administration has abused it for whole nations, including Afghans, Ukrainians, Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans, along with other selected nationalities to enter into the U.S. and receive work authorizations instead of going through the statutory visa process at the U.S. embassies in their home countries. For instance, one penalty which took place from April 1997 is that foreigners who stay in the U.S. illegally for more than 6 months but less than a year are not allowed to return for 3 years. Those who stay here illegally longer than 12 months aren't allowed to return for 10 years. The author refers to this misuse of parole as a scam and concludes with, apparently, such a scam is fine as long as the scam is perpetuated by the government itself. As I've said before, I'm strongly in favor of much easier legal paths to citizenship, but they must follow the law, not walk across the border. A concern for those of us who want the U.S. Justice Department to stop the Democrats' lawfare and provide equal justice is something happening at the Department of Justice. The Daily Caller News Foundation released a special report that the Biden-Harris administration is using a special approach to hire into the Department of Justice before the November 5th election. Part of the report states, hundreds of people, primarily lawyers and judges, have been appointed to the Environmental and Natural Resources, Antitrust, and Immigration Review divisions of the DOJ using its Schedule A hiring authority. Schedule A hiring does not require appointments to be made on the basis of merit. Let me read that again. Scheduling A hiring does not require appointments to be made on the basis of merit. Appointments do not expire at the end of the current president's term, meaning these bureaucrats will stick around even if former President Donald Trump takes office in 2025, according to the Office of Budget and Management. The strategy is that these folks will be loyal to the Biden-Harris cause and will continue on board after 2024. They could serve to frustrate Trump if he is returned to the White House. For instance, the report also claims the DOJ used Schedule A to hire well over 100 immigration judges for its Immigration Review Division. Immigration judges are responsible for deciding whether a non-citizen may remain in the United States. Fraud permeates the Biden-Harris illegal alien sponsorship program. Organizations within the U.S. applied to be financial supporters of the paroled migrants using fake Social Security numbers or those of dead people. Multiple supporter applications came from the same address, email, or phone number, or used the same exact wording. An example mentioned was that nearly 600 financial supporters applied using just one Florida warehouse as an address. Further, there were 3,200 supporters who together applied to bring in a total of 100,000 applicants, or over 30 each. Senator Scott from Florida summarized the report on the Biden-Harris administration's abandonment of the U.S. investment in Afghanistan. Scott stated he and Kamala Harris together made the decision to get this done because they don't care about how many people die. 13 servicemen and women died. It's a disaster. That is not to mention over $80 billion in military hardware and, of course, the strategic Bagram Air Force Base itself. Worse, in the mess of the abandonment, 77,000 were brought to the United States, but of them, only 5,000 were Americans and another 2,500 were special visas. So what about the other 70,000? What kind of vetting was done on them? Did we bring in Taliban in that group? Nobody knows. A new report by the Washington Free Beacon makes some significant claims about best-selling author Robin DiAngelo. She is known for the books White Fragility and Nice Racism. Basically, the books go after white people in general with the pitch that being white automatically makes you an insensitive racist who needs to be reprogrammed. That's my interpretation, of course. The accusations against her that she plagiarized several scholars, including 2 minorities, in her doctoral thesis. As someone who holds a hard-earned doctorate and speaks to my students about the importance of crediting others when cited in their works, I take these accusations very seriously. However, I do not see that any determination has been made yet. Maybe there is an explanation. Our series Interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. We welcome Ken Good for his first appearance on Saving America. He graduated from Hardin-Simmons University in 1982 with a Bachelor of Arts degree. He received a Master of Education degree in 1986 from Tarleton State University. In 1989, he earned his law degree from Texas Tech School of Law, where he was a member of the Texas Tech Law Review. Mr. Good has argued cases before the Supreme Court of Texas, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, along with numerous courts of appeals, including the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. He is the author of Good on Bail, a practice guide created for the bail industry professionals. In addition, he has written numerous articles on the subject of bail reform, including what successful bail reform looks like. Mr. Good is married and has 2 daughters.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I feel like I'm racing to try to catch up with you after listening to that.
Well, sometimes we have to shorten the bios so that we can have enough time for the interview part of the meeting that we have here on Zoom.
The most important thing you said is I'm married and have 2 kids.
Yes, well, I'm one notch up. I've got a bunch of kids and I've got 7 grandchildren. You get to the next gen, you start counting the grandchildren.
I'm telling you, you're bragging now. You're making me very, very jealous.
You'll get there, I promise you. It's a trip. Well, as you know, our format is we ask our guests 3 questions. So first, tell us about the organization Professional Bondsmen of Texas.
Well, let's see. I would describe that as the voice of the bail industry in Texas. It's an organization that's made up of bail bondsmen across the state of Texas, but they also are very active. They have a legislative committee, so they're active at the legislature. I'm on the board of directors, and I'm on the legislative committee. We propose bills to the legislature, and we are a resource to the legislature on bail issues. And we should have an active session coming up. We have other committees that are very active. We have an annual meeting in the next few months, and so we're actively getting ready for that. And so I would describe our organization mostly as a resource to legislatures across the country and the public to educate them about bail-related issues. And I think we have a blog that highlights important stories in the criminal justice area, and we also have our own podcast, which we call the Bail Post. You can find a link to it on our website, pbtx.com, but you can also just go to thebailpost.com and you can find our shows that we've done about all kinds of different criminal justice issues.
Well, that sounds like a pretty important organization. Now, Ken, many Americans are concerned about persons accused of serious crimes being released without cash bond. Does that really make the community less safe?
I think that we are finding, well, we've always said yes. The answer to that question is yes. But I think during COVID, we found that there was a lot of data that supported that. There was Yolo County in California released a study after COVID where they found that people released on cash bonds by the private industry versus people released on simple release, which would be no cash bail. It's just called different things across the country. That people released on just simple release with their promise to come back had a 200% greater chance of committing a violent offense in the next 18 months. And that's, I think, a devastating number. I mean, think about it. Just the type of release that you're using puts the defendant or has a 200% greater chance of putting them in a worse position. How is that even possible? Well, the way it works is once you're released, the release mechanism determines your rate of return. So, the private industry has the lowest failure to appear rate. These no cash bail systems have a very high failure to appear rate. So if there's an 80% chance, like in all misdemeanor courts in California, because they use simple release, if there's an 80% chance you're not going to come back to court, or that your case is going to be put on hold until you come back because you missed court, well, there's a great risk that is going to create chaos because the same number of cases are being filed on average. And that puts an incredible pressure on courts to just dismiss cases. Chaos creates de facto decriminalization. De facto decriminalization is a green light for criminals to commit more crime. And that's what we've seen.
Well, it does seem that this situation is really, we're running kind of a test situation here in parts of the country with this no cash bail. And it sounds like the report so far is it's not working.
I think that's absolutely correct. And the problem is, it's not that we are trying something that we have studies that say we should try this. We're trying something that's never been done, and we're trying something that the experts would say there's nothing compatible with the private industry. That's the reason why it's been around for 200 years. All of these other things we're trying have not been tested. They've never been shown to work, and they have a huge failure to appear rate. But we're doing them anyway, so we're having the same results that we've had in the past.
Amazing. And I have to ask kind of an entertainment question as our third question today is, there's been a reality TV show about bail bondsmen. There was a fictional show, Lee Majors, The Fall Guy, where he was a professional stuntman, but when he wasn't doing that, he was out finding people that had skipped out on their bail. And of course, if the accused skips out on their bail, your bonding company still has to pay that cash to the court if they can't deliver the person. So how does what we've seen on television compare with what happens in your day-to-day life?
Well, I think the day-to-day life is a lot more boring. There's always a few exceptions to the rule, but let's start with the general stuff. So when you fail to miss court, you get scared. You don't know what's going to happen. So the bondsman calls you, talks to your family, and assures you, hey, this is what you can expect. Come on, we'll walk you back to court. And so I would say a large number of time people just get a call, they trust their bondsman, they go back to court, they get their case back on track pretty quickly. But the problem is, like in Texas, bondsmen don't have the ability to arrest. So we can find them, and then we can call the police and say, hey, we know where the defendant is. There's a warrant for his arrest. Will you come and pick him up? Okay, that's another area. But then there's the people that are, they know what's going to happen to them if they go to court. And so they know they're going to spend some time in the pokey. And so they're not going to come back willingly. And so we have to hire what we would call recovery agents. And I think that some of those are what maybe the extreme cases are what you see television shows about. And that's what people who are paid to go and serve that warrant and take them back into custody. There's been some cases on that recently that are very eye-opening. People crossing state lines with someone, and if they don't have the authority to do that, they get the bond. The recovery agent gets charged with kidnapping under the federal statute. So I think we're becoming very adverse of what we can and cannot do. We don't want to cross the lines, and we don't want to be too aggressive, but we also want people to fulfill their promises to go to court. And if they don't, then we have agreed that we will do everything that we can that's legally possible to get them to court. The bonding companies in Texas cannot arrest, but we can hire private detectives who can. And so that's what happens in the extreme cases if we cannot convince them to come back.
Ken W. Good, this has been fascinating. This is such an interesting area. How can our audience get more information about you and about the professional bondsmen of Texas?
They can go to our website, pbtx.com. We also have a Facebook page. We have a Twitter account. They're all linked on our Facebook page. We have a YouTube channel. We have, as I've mentioned before, we have our own podcast called the Bell Post. And we have a blog where we highlight all these stories in the criminal justice realm. I think it's so important that we're out here telling this story of how the criminal justice system works, because if you just listen to the advocates for change, I don't know if anyone's telling the story that we're telling, and that is something that's been around for 200 years and why it works so well. It just does one thing, and it gets people back to court. All you hear is we need to change, we need to be more fair, that what we're currently doing is not constitutional, even though the courts keep saying it's constitutional. And so we're highlighting really the good stories of the criminal justice system, even though all you hear in the news sometimes is the bad.
I understand. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. America is broke, and neither political party seems to have the will, the intention, or the plan to fix it. It is time for a change. The United States has been on a spending spree, pretty much covers 6 decades, and times are starting to catch up with them, and it is indeed very concerning. So in early 2018, I released a book called Decline of America: 100 years of leadership failures. The number one reason I wrote that book is the national debt. And it needed fixing then, and boy, does it really need fixing today. The second reason, just to be complete, was the ridiculous deification, as I see it, of Franklin Roosevelt. Frankly, he has placed America, or he did place America, on its current path towards a Marxism socialist approach. And a lot of people don't seem to realize that because he's been so covered up with flowers and, oh, he was such a great president and all that nonsense, that people don't realize how the bloated government that we deal with today is really a legacy that goes back to Franklin Roosevelt's time. And that's very unfortunate for America. So 6 years roughly since I wrote that book, the official national debt is over $33 trillion. It was a little over $20 trillion at the time I released the book. And in my analysis, I initiate that the national debt is actually a bogus number. The real national debt in the United States at that time, 6 years ago, was $100 trillion, because the figure does not include the shortfall in Social Security and Medicare. I've done a recent piece on published by American Thinker, talking about the fact that we are out of money per the federal government. Nobody made this up. The feds are telling us that Social Security and Medicare are out of money by 2033, maybe even earlier than that. Also, the number does not include pensions for disabled veterans, for regular veterans, and for all of the dole called government pensions that have been dealt out over the last so many years that it's hard to count. And of course, these are the only folks in America, pretty much, with the exception of employees of a few big companies, who actually have guaranteed pensions. Time to cut that back, folks. Time to eliminate federal pensions for employees. And I've been calling on that for at least 6 years, and I call on that again tonight. One of my favorite songs is the song lyrics is the phrase, they're rearranging chairs on the deck of the Titanic. And that's pretty much what we're seeing. And note that the scum in Congress is fighting against just even small reductions. I think the conservative Republicans asked for an 8% reduction and accountability for what money is being spent in Ukraine. And the Democrats in Congress won't even agree to that. Folks, this is ludicrous. I call for a one-third reduction in federal spending. Yes, and that includes an increase in spending for the Department of Defense, although I want them to account for every penny from this point going forward. We cannot continue to use the phrase kicking the can down the road. Folks, the can is too fat to keep kicking down the road. And it's not fair to our children, our grandchildren, and any subsequent generations that manage to survive to that point. We have to fix the national debt now. And come on, Americans, vote out anyone running for office at the federal level who does not commit to massive cuts in federal staffing. Let's eliminate entire agencies. I don't need to go through the list. Department of Education, Department of Homeland Security, lots of these departments are accomplishing nothing today except sitting around, many of them working from home, sucking up big paychecks, big benefits, and unearned pensions. Time to cut it out. What's left is the military. The military has been spending money like a drunk sailor, and that includes, of course, the Ukraine mess. It's time for them to adopt a modern approach to the military. Building massive, expensive aircraft carriers, as I've mentioned recently, is not the way to win the Cold War. Nuclear submarines are our best approach. They have less people on them. They are far more lethal, and they are much harder for the other side to defeat. Yes, folks, nuclear submarines the way to go, drones, and also outer space. And these are things that could be done, interestingly, far more economically than the current structure of the military. As we grow up, a common reference for success or failure is the letter grade. Whether we're in grammar school or college, we all want an A grade and certainly regard an F as a big failure. Here at Saving America, we scan the news for reports of celebrities, politicians, or others who just end up in the public eye. So the A grades are awarded to people and organizations for great service to their communities, and the F grades, of course, are unfortunately more common, are awarded to those who need to do a lot better. The badge of dishonor today belongs to Bernie the Fraud Sanders, the senator from Vermont. I say fraud since he claims to be a socialist, but is worth about $3 million. Last I heard, he has 3 houses. Here's an exchange we're going to read. We try not to do too many quotes. Reminded by the Times reporter that he is now someone of considerable means, Sanders retorted, "I wrote a best-selling book. If you write a best-selling book, you can be a millionaire too." Folks, Bernie may have missed that in his promotion material. That's capitalism, you idiot. Yes, folks. So what have you got here? As I explained before, the only successful economic system in the history of the world is capitalism. Bernie, a typical socialist advocate, wants everybody else to live in poverty while he lives the good life on a government pension and books that only sold because he was in office on the public payroll. As I explained before, the only successful economic system in the history of the world is capitalism. Bernie, a typical socialist advocate, wants everybody else to live in poverty while he lives the good life on a government pension and books that only sold because he was in office on the public payroll. Bernie has supported communist governments around the world, many of which have subsequently failed. I couldn't find the information on it, but I believe he and his wife allegedly honeymooned in Moscow prior to the end of the USSR. Yeah, not someone I would put on my favorite American list. So is he a socialist, which is oftentimes compared to some of the Northern European countries, or is he just another dirty commie, which is the term that I grew up with during the Cold War, and I believe still applies to people who think communism is a good idea. So Bernie gets his F grade award, this time for pushing to investigate war crimes against Israel, for defending itself against the monstrous assault at actions against civilians by Hamas and its Palestinian supporters. I make no apologies for supporting Israel defending its citizens and its clear historical right to control its very limited tract of land. It is sad that the Middle East at this point is really beginning to accept Israel, and we've got the Abraham Accords, which have been very successful, and yet we've got clowns like Bernie causing problems. We've got these protests that are completely out of line. And by the way, Bernie is not only our F grade recipient for being the fake socialist that he is, but he also is honored in a funny sort of way. In my book, Bad Deal for America, he does get a face card, and he is deserving of being in Bad Deal for America and his F grade. Business students, business persons, or consumers, business law impacts much of what you do. This segment is designed to help you get past the headlines on key stories. A federal appeals court has blocked all remaining parts of the SAVE student debt relief plan. In a long-running political battle, the Biden administration and its education department has been trying various approaches to forgiving federally authorized student loans. Some accommodations that he made, for instance, during the COVID pandemic, he suspended payments and interest on loans. These were accepted. On the other hand, following the end of COVID in 2022, he attempted to forgive $400 billion in student loans debt for some 43 million Americans. The Republican attorneys general in various states have resorted to the federal courts to block such programs. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled in June 2023 that as president, he lacked the legal authority to provide such widespread loan forgiveness. Undeterred, Biden announced another round of student loan reductions and forgiveness recently. This program was named Saving on a Valuable Education, or SAVE. It was scheduled to start on July 1, 2024. It was to be an income-based loan forgiveness and loan payment adjustment program. However, early this year, the administration announced a $1.2 billion forgiveness plan described as early application of the SAVE plan. Parallel to his first effort to do so, this produced another round of litigation attempting to stop most of his edicts. Generally, the opponents are Republican states, which have described the previous and current attempts as government-subsidized vote buying targeting younger voters. 7 GOP states, led by Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey, went to court to block SAVE. In June, a federal district court judge in St. Louis blocked the education department from granting any further loan forgiveness under the SAVE plan, but declined to block all of the program. Both sides appealed to the district court decision. The 8th Circuit Court of Appeals just put the entire SAVE program on hold until further proceedings can be conducted. The legal challenges to the SAVE plan contain the main argument that the education department exceeded its authority because the program was implemented without the approval of Congress. They claimed that if the Biden administration could cancel debt by defining the terms of income-driven repayment plans just by executive action, this would open the door to much bigger forgiveness programs. A spokesperson has said, the Biden-Harris administration won't stop fighting to provide support and relief to borrowers across the country, no matter how many times Republican elected officials try to stop us. There is a separate court action before SCOTUS to suspend all federal loan forgiveness pending the current lower court actions. The public response has been mixed. Many Americans who have paid their loans in full, and in fact, their adult children have faithfully paid their loans in full as well, resent the government forgiving current loans. The commentary is that this is being done with the tax dollars of those who have already paid their loans. On the other side, many Americans, even some retired baby boomers, still owe on their student loans. This creates an interest in having some type of relief with regard to these loans. So we shall see, folks. The U.S. Supreme Court orders a review of obstruction charges for former President Trump and the January 6th defendants. I would place this case third out of the many major decisions for the 23-24 SCOTUS term. That is due to the impact that it may have on cases pending against the former president, as well as the numerous January 6th defendants. It is estimated that at least half the January 6 defendants were charged with obstructing an official proceeding. However, Chief Justice John Roberts stated the government must establish that the defendant impaired the availability or integrity for use in an official proceeding of records, documents, objects, or other things used in an official proceeding or attempted to do so. He was joined by the other conservative justices, except Amy Coney Barrett. On the other hand, liberal Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson sided with the conservative majority. Interesting switch there. The plaintiff in this case is Joseph Fisher, a former police officer. He was in the Capitol on January 6th and was charged with obstructing an official proceeding. Fisher's lawyer argued that Congress passed the 2002 anti-obstruction law in response to the financial scandal that led to the collapse of Enron. He successfully argued that the law was intended to prevent destroying or altering documents. Many will recall that part of the Enron scandal was that employees of the now defunct Arthur Andersen accounting firm destroyed many boxes of accounting records. The firm was charged with criminal violations, but the conviction was reversed on appeal since it was determined to not have been illegal at the time that the employees of Arthur Andersen destroyed the work files. He is the CEO of Blue Ocean Global Technology and co-founder of Girl Power Talk. He is a CFA chart holder, a CFP professional, and a chartered alternative investment analyst. Samir leads client engagements focused on digital transformation, risk management, and technology development. He is a subject matter expert witness in economic damages, intellectual property, and internet defamation cases. He authors CLE programs with the Philadelphia Bar Association. Samir is a frequent speaker at private industry and public sector conferences, including engagements with the Federal Home Loan Bank, Global Digital Marketing Summit, IBM, New York State Bar Association, U.S. Defense Leadership Forum, and the U.S. State Department's Foreign Service Institute. He serves on the board of directors of Future Business Leaders of America and Girl Power USA. He is a member of a number of professional associations. I met Samir recently at the annual meeting of the Academy of Legal Studies and Business, where we are both members. He is a graduate of Georgetown University and has held leadership roles at Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, and Scotiabank. He is also a CFA Institute 2022 Inspirational Leader Award recipient. Now, we had to edit down this list of his accomplishments or we would not have time for the interviews.
I hope I can live up to I didn't know if you were talking about me, but it's one of those things where I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to share perspective here. David, one of the things that I really value, Dr. Schein, is cultivating relationships with people. And that's why I joined the Academy of Legal Studies and Business and how we became friends. And I think our commitment to education and empowering people to make the most informed decisions is definitively mutual, which is how we ended up here today. Not after, just meeting in DC, but also the memorable lunch we had at one of your favorite French restaurants in Houston, going back a few weeks ago.
And so, as you know, we asked 3 questions, and you and I talked briefly before we began recording today that our target is to inspire people to check into you and to say, hey, this is a pretty cool guy. Let's see what he's doing, and to pursue more, not to tell the entire story, or that would take 2 weeks. And we don't have that much bandwidth.
I would say that, we'll try to remember that Abraham Lincoln aphorism of better to be thought a fool than to speak up and remove all doubt. So hopefully it's a memorable 15 minutes.
But our first question is, many people hear the acronym CFA, but what does that mean and why is that significant?
CFA is Chartered Financial Analyst. The Financial Times called it the gold standard in finance. And it's a designation that's earned from taking 3 examinations that cover a wide discipline within economics, accounting, finance, alternative investments. And I think there's roughly around 250,000 or so CFA charter holders in the world. I've been incredibly blessed to not just be a CFA charter holder for the last 12 or 13 years, but to have roles at CFA Institute in a volunteer and also a consulting capacity. I've spoken at probably 50 plus CFA member societies. There's about 180 throughout the world. I've delivered programs. I've hosted their talk show. I author regularly for CFA Institute on a range of subjects that, of course, are of mutual interest. And I've also had the pleasure of there's 3 levels of the CFA exam. The last level is level 3, and I've been a CFA exams grader I was a senior grader for about, I think, 10 years up until COVID, and then they moved it online. And people would say, wow, Samir, you must really be a closet nerd to be a grader of exams. And I said, well, that's definitely true. But actually grading the exams, David, was one of the best kept secrets at CFA Institute, because prior to COVID, they would fly in anywhere from 600 to 900 CFA charter holders from all over the world. And we would spend a week or 2 weeks together. And not only was that such an eclectic collection of beautiful, intelligent, and oftentimes I would say benevolent and altruistic people who wanted to give back to the profession, but they also did really fun things like rent out James Monroe's house for parties and get-togethers. And so that was a very special time in my life to be able to go down there and give back to the Institute. I think anytime you have designations and credentials, and you being so accomplished, and not just being a lawyer, but also a practitioner in-house with large organizations, as well as an academic and somebody that is, driving the next generation of leaders in business and law. Anytime you have any designations, there's signals. So CFA is a really strong signal to the marketplace, to those that know about it, that this person has a stamp of understanding in valuation, in corporate finance, in accounting, in economics, and of course, in ethics. And many CFA charter holders, the vast majority of them, go into and have senior roles in portfolio management, business management, venture capital, private equity, real estate. And so it's certainly not just been an awesome designation that people comment on, and those who know about it say, wow, Samir, I had no idea you were a charter holder, and I saw that. But most importantly, like anything, it's about what you put in. And so I've put a piece of my heart, soul, and mind into the CFA community, and I've received, a big multiple of that back to me in relationships, opportunities, and just authentic collaboration.
Very, very impressive. Our second question is, how did you happen to start Blue Ocean Global Technology, and what type of services does that company provide?
Yeah, so the joys of entrepreneurship. I always say I'm the chief dishwasher and last one to get paid, first one to fix all the problems. But entrepreneurship is many ways like jumping in the Pacific Ocean, trying to swim across. And I founded a wealth management company, registered investment advisor, and I didn't want to be held back by technology resources. So I did a global search looking for people of character, and I interviewed 100, 150 small businesses in digital marketing, in technology development, looking for some that I could hire for myself to launch our company, as well as for clients and friends. And I came across a couple really good ones, and I formed partnerships with them. I became a client, I referred clients, and I said, wait a minute, I've spent a year and a half, much of that time in the emerging markets, finding some really good partners. I should probably share those resources. And that is the impetus for how Blue Ocean Global Technology was created. And over the last 12 or so years, we've evolved. Of course, we specialize, David, in building, monitoring, repairing digital reputation. So how do you take the trust, goodwill, relationship capital you have offline for your business, yourself, and how do you represent that with authenticity on the internet? So when somebody is referred to Samir and they go and Google him and they read about him and they say, wow, this is somebody I really connect with. And so online reputation management, custom technology development is a core focus. Additionally, we've evolved where a law firm, Nixon Peabody, said to us about 8 years ago, they said, Samir, you've done really good work for our firm. We'd like you to be an expert witness in one of our cases. I'm like, what's an expert witness and why would I want to do that? And so since then, we've built a niche practice within Blue Ocean Global Technology where we are hired to address and quantify damages on court cases related to business disputes, of course, economic damages, disgorgement, intellectual property, copyright, trademark, social media, internet defamation, digital marketing, source code. So there's a wide range because you can say that we have expertise in different areas. So we're called in by some of the largest law firms in the world, including some in the top 5, of course, by size and revenue, but many boutiques. And we're called in to craft expert reports, to provide litigation consulting services and advise attorneys on how they should proceed. And many times, as they say in my NDAs, to basically do their work and then be able to take on more cases. And that's been a product of the way that we've provided value. And so I think that's not only been a really important source of growth for us, but it's been an opportunity to learn. And just about every expert witness client that we take on, either the client or the law firm or both, ends up working with us in several capacities. And more recently, David, we have moved into federal contracting. We're approved on the SAM platform. We're working on joining the GSA schedule. Blue Ocean Global Technology recently became an 8A certified business, minority-owned business. And so we're working in the federal contracting space as well.
Sounds like a lot of fun. And as you know, I'm parallel to you, an expert witness. In my area, of course, is employment law and sometimes academically related things like business ethics and things like that. So I find it an interesting, and I do find it expands your horizons a little bit. And it's an interesting area, but it's so fascinating because there's so many pieces that you have under Blue Ocean Global Technology. But I want to switch gears for our third question. As co-founder of Girl Power Talk, would you please share with the audience what that organization does? And since you were a co-founder, tell us how you came to start it. And as you and I know separately, I'm a huge proponent of equal opportunities for women across the world. And, I'm proud to have women in my life at many different levels who I want to make sure that they have as much opportunity as men do.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Girl Power Talk was born out of trends that exist in history, in society, in America, globally. One of them being, for the most of our history, look at all the progress we've made in science, innovation, math, technology, and women have been relegated to the sidelines for a big part of it. And imagine if that wasn't the case. Think about how much farther we may be. So Girl Power Talk recognizes the extraordinary potential of women in business. And so Girl Power Talk was born out of that trend. There's also a huge supply-demand imbalance of qualified opportunities for young women, exacerbated in the emerging markets. Africa's 54 countries having 750 million or so people under the age of 28. India having 500 million people under the age of 26, half of them, of course, being women. And so how can we find brilliant young people? And the world has changed so much because of the internet and technology. You look at a young woman in Kampala, Uganda, in Karachi, Pakistan, in Mumbai, India, or in Chandigarh, India, where our offices are, or in Jakarta, Indonesia. And today, she, watches Game of Thrones, knows about Breaking Bad, understands and pays attention to the U.S. political race, and she can actually connect with and relate to perhaps executives and founders and colleagues in the United States in a way that no one ever could have imagined 30 years ago. And so if you take those concepts and you say, you know what, imagine a fictional book, Dr. Schein, where young people are happy and there's intellectual freedom and they're learning, growing, and creating together. And there's a conscious bias towards women. Now imagine making it real. And in many ways, like the Peter Drucker aphorism, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Girl Power Talk was born to reverse engineer a company culture that is innovative, similar to perfection. We strive for it, knowing we can never achieve it. We believe in creating a utopia, knowing we never will, but we'll get closer than anyone else if we believe and we have a healthy balance. And then I also think young people, particularly younger generations, relative, generally speaking, of course, to older generations, they really care about driving social impact and doing good. And many times we reach this why in the road. I got to choose to have a career focused on money, or I'm going to go work for a nonprofit. And we don't believe they should be mutually exclusive. And so Girl Power Talk team members work with our foundation, Girl Power USA, a 501c3 based in the United States. We're building a brand and a culture. It's the absolute best place for young people, especially young women, to learn, grow, and develop. And Girl Power Talk team members across departments, be it our growing legal team led by our chief legal officer, Ashna Dougal, be it in finance, be it in marketing, be it in technology, be it in public relations and content writing. They're provided opportunities to work on real projects with clients direct, or as we started in doing some of the delivery for Blue Ocean Global Technology projects. So the two companies work hand in hand, and you create something called Girl Power Talk. And I never thought that I'd have, I'm just thinking back to a conversation where there was a lead partner in Manhattan at a law firm, and she went to Yale Law School. And she said, Samir, our assignment was to find the best expert with the most case history experience. And you've got a page, which is pretty good, better than most. And I found two other people, one had 2 pages, one had a page and a half. And so technically I'm supposed to go with them. But before we start this interview, I want to say that we're going to hire you. I read a lot about you, and I'm someone who always said I'd give back to women, and I don't think I do enough in terms of impact and projects. And then I'm successful now. I'm leading this law firm, and I look at you, and you're a man that is spending a considerable amount of time in his life to provide opportunities and do the things that I always said I want to do, should be doing. I'm not. And so at the very least, I think in becoming friends with you, maybe we can work on some of those things together. And I also watched some of your keynotes, and I think you'd probably be better on the stand than these other experts. So that's my disconnect. But I never thought that creating something like that could be an asset in connecting with people, because, it's so easy, when it's real. And so that's a little bit about, Girl Power Talk. And I know I've masterfully used my ears and mouth disproportionately, but I hope that helps for your audience as well as you.
Samir Samal, you are a great guest, and we've enjoyed having you here. How can our audience get more information about you and these various ventures?
Sure. One is there are 3 respective websites. There's Blue Ocean Global Tech, TECH.com. Then there is girlpowertalk.com and girlpowerusa.org. And those represent, these 3 organizations. You can also reach me. One of my email addresses is ssomal@blueoceanglobaltech.com. Just because you're a friend of mine, Dr. Schein, my mobile phone is 202-276-7589. And, I'm somebody that, just takes the time. It doesn't matter who's calling me, and I get solicitations all day. I always pick up the phone. I always talk to people. And I think that that's something where one relationship, one conversation, one new friendship can change the course of your life. And I try to be that for everyone that I'm so fortunate to meet.
Fascinating. Well, we appreciate your being here today. Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. Schein, and I will